International COO of Global Surge. Please welcome on stage, Luke Lyons.
On October 29, 2125, it'll be 100 years from today. What will your ministry look like 100 years from today? What will your ministry look like 100 years from today? What am I doing, not should be doing, but what am I doing now that is consistently developing a ministry that lasts beyond myself? It doesn't matter if you're a church of 5 and you're just getting started, or 50 and you have a little bit of momentum, 500 and you believe you've made it big time, or reaching into the mega church size of 5,000. If we don't have a sustainability model for our church, it's going to die with us. It has to go beyond us. It has to live beyond us. It did for Jesus Christ. It did for the disciples and the apostles, and it can be for us too. You see, a truly sustaining ministry, a real history-altering movement, will have a mindset and a culture that we must develop as leaders to always be building for the next generation. Too many never reach their true momentum. They never reach this level of generational ministry, and it usually comes down to kind of two main reasons. The first is they don't get out of their own way. Ever been around leaders like that? Like they are their own diversion. They are their own stop sign. They are their own slowing down. They don't leave room for others to rise up. I've seen too many leaders and too many supposedly generational ministries where the leader or the founder keeps going until the day he dies, and then the rest of the team is left to pick up the pieces. They don't get out of their own way. The second main reason I found is sometimes it's fear. Sometimes as the leader, we're afraid of what it could look like if it wasn't me. If I wasn't in charge, if I wasn't driving and leading the ship, if I wasn't coursing the path, if I wasn't the man or woman of influence, if it's not me, then who? And we get in our own ways because we're afraid of what it could be. We have to recognize many times that we are the flame and the torch to show others the way. That's who we are and why we've been placed in leadership. That's sometimes why God has given us the opportunity and the responsibility to lead. When I, as a leader, sometimes the founder, whether you stepped into a ministry that was already established or you have carved it out of a rock, you have founded something, I have to be consistently and constantly not only encouraging, but also empowering, which means giving them the power and equipping those around me so that I can build a platform for others to stand on for years to come. There's a story of a young pastor who was in a small country town out in the province, in the village, and they were having their big anniversary service, and so their church was small, it was about 50 to 75, and he was expecting about 200 for their big anniversary kind of homecoming service. And so they invited in a guest speaker from out of town, and this pastor pastored a very large church, and so he came in, and honestly, the pastor of the big church was not really impressed with this small building and the small rooms and the number of people expected. He was used to thousands, and he was going to get maybe 200. Well, the young pastor took him around the church and then brought him up on stage before the service and was showing him. He said, I have to tell you, this stage is really important to me. He said, this is God's gift to me. And he said, yeah, I understand that. Every pastor has a stage. He goes, no, I don't think you understand. My father built this stage with his hands. He was a carpenter. My father built the platform I get to stand on every weekend. I'm standing on the shoulders. I'm standing on the platform that my father built. As leaders, we have to have that mindset. We must be building a platform for the next generation. Let's take discipleship as an example. In Global Surge, discipleship is one of our core 3 values. One-on-one discipleship, our small groups that meet within the communities or our life groups, and then our weekend celebration service. Every church plant that we plant follows in those 3 priorities every single time. And we take it very seriously. In fact, when we coach and develop new church planners, discipleship, one-on-one discipleship, is a constant part of our dialogue, constant part of our conversation. When we're meeting with church planners, the first question is usually not, what is your offering or what is your attendance? The question usually is, how many disciples do you have actively meeting in your church? You want to see sustainable growth? It's not always in the offering, because that can rise and fall, but it's really in discipleship. And it's in making disciples. Our goal is that every church will have a strong discipleship ministry. It's not a program, it's a culture, it's a lifestyle for us that has over 90% of our churches engaged in one-on-one discipleship. And we've seen it. We've gone to our churches. I've done kind of just walk in and ask the question, would you stand if you're engaged in one-on-one discipleship? And we've seen 90% of our congregation stand up. Earlier you met Pepsi, and Pepsi pointed out her disciple, and these other men, and the other men and these volunteers who have come from the Philippines. Several of them are my disciples. This is part of our culture and our ministry, is to engage in discipleship and to be disciple-making disciples. See, we believe it's the duty and the privilege of every discipler to intentionally encourage and equip their disciple to find the next disciple and to train them how to find the next. Let me tell you a story about a friend of mine. We were growing our ministry. We had a young lady, her name was Sheila, and she was in charge of our small group ministry and our discipleship ministry. And everything began to grow, and she came to me one week and said, Pastor Luke, I can't handle it anymore. We have to have someone in charge of discipleship. It's expanding. I said, well, who do you recommend? She said, I have a young lady that I've been discipling. I recommend her. Her name is Jackie. I said, okay, let's bring Jackie in. Now, this was not me interviewing her. This was in a room with other great leaders. And I said, Jackie, tell us your story. And she began to tell us. And I said, this is our vision for discipleship. We believe this can really grow and strengthen our churches, not just our church, but other churches around us. And I want you to increase your vision to beyond just one church, but to all of our church network, and then into across the nations, into other countries as well. And she said, I can do that with one condition. I can only give you 2 years. I said, okay, that's an interesting condition. She said, well, I've fallen in love, and we're going to get married. I said, does he know that? She said, not yet, but we will. And after we get married, I'm very likely to move back to the province where he's going to be pastoring a church. I said, Jackie, if you'll give us 2 years, 100%, we'll take it, as long as you train the next leader. She said, okay. Well, lo and behold, they did get engaged, and her husband later ended up getting a job at the same school that she was teaching at. See, Jackie was a school teacher. She liked things to be organized, which I loved in discipleship. You need someone who's very organized and structured. And so her husband ended up moving up to Mega Manila, where we live in our ministry in the Philippines. And so he came up, and they've lived, and they started serving and continued to expand. She ended up stopped and quit being a teacher to more ministry full-time, and the Lord led her to do that. It continued to expand. And then in November of 2023, just 2 years ago, we were having our Missions Fest, which all of our churches, we gather together and everybody comes in representing different countries. And we had a call to missions in how to serve in other nations. And Jackie and her husband, Henry, came up on stage and said, we're moving to Bangkok. She didn't tell me. I was in shock. I'm in the back going, what in the world? But I was excited. She continues to lead the ministry from Bangkok. She now has established country leaders in every different nations where we are growing our church plants and our disciples. And I met with her just this last September, just this last August. I was in Cambodia, the capital city of Phnom Penh. I said, Jackie, can you fly down from Bangkok? It's a 1-hour flight, and meet with me and the new country director of discipleship for Global Surge for Cambodia. She said, I would love to. She sat next to us. She was working on some documentation. She said, I have good news, Pastor Luke. I said, tell me the good news. She said, when I started 10 years ago, we had 600 disciples. Now we're at 6,561. What I love about a teacher is it was down to the one. She's not a very good minister, right? I mean, if she was a Baptist or a Pentecostal, she would say, close to 7,000, right? No. It was 6,561. And she knew. And she has the list of names, and she knows exactly who these people are because it's a value to us. She has found the secret to sustaining church planting growth is through discipleship. The next is the next generation. In your church, what does the next generation look like? In your marketplace, in your ministry? Surely God has not just called us. Surely God has called others to work alongside us and after us to carry on the ministry. One of the hard parts of growing ministry, and if your ministry is expanding rapidly, of a powerful, influential, especially a public ministry, one of the hardest and most easiest diseases to infect yourself and your ministry is to believe that we are the secret ingredient to God's movement. And God uses people every day, but He doesn't just use us. Follow the pattern of the New Testament, you see the disciples making disciples, the apostles developing other leaders and church leaders. What we should be saying and we should be thinking and doing is, how can I consistently develop the next generation and the next leader to take our ministry to the next level? I challenge you, don't give it to the next person that's going to keep it at status quo. Give it to somebody that you have empowered that could be and bigger and stronger than you and in your ministry. Give them the ability. And this is where the real work of sustainability comes from. Let me tell you, it's not sexy. It's not gorgeous. It's not glamorous. It takes time. It usually takes more time than we ever expect. There will always be setbacks and delays and disappointments, but let me tell you, it works. It works. We've seen it all throughout history. So how can I do this? One of our biggest reasons we established our S4 conference, we've been doing it second time here in Kenya, we've been doing it several times in Manila, Philippines, is we want to bring practical steps to church planters, to leaders, to organizations that can think beyond their boundaries and say, how can I use this today? One of the quickest ways you can identify if you're preparing for the next generation, for a generation that will sustain your ministry beyond you for years and years to come, is to examine your personal calendar. If your calendar is consistently full of meetings that are for the future, and not just for a future event, but to develop the next leader, then you're on the right path. If your calendar is vacant of those things, start putting them in. Begin asking God, fasting and praying, God, who is the next leader that you need me to pour everything into to earn double the blessing, to go beyond? If it's full, we'll see God continue to develop the next generation. There's a church planter out of Washington, D.C. in the United States. He planted in one of the most difficult areas of America, in Washington, D.C. You have people on both ends of the spectrum, and you're never going to make anybody happy because they're all coming at you this direction. And he planted a church a couple decades ago, and he wrote a book called Chase the Lion. And this book says, if your dream doesn't scare you, it's not big enough. And he says this, he says, an inheritance is what you leave for somebody. A legacy is what you leave in someone. Legacy is the influence your dream has on others even after you die, because influence compounds interest. Legacy isn't measured by what you accomplished in your lifetime. I'm going to say that one more time because I think it's worth repeating. Legacy is not measured by what you have accomplished in your lifetime. It is measured by the lives affected by your life even after you're gone. A leader that leads and builds a sustaining ministry leads from a position and from a posture that develops a path for others to stand on, to take, and to move to a higher ground. That's what a true leader of sustainability looks like. They don't want to lead just for their generation. They want to lead for the generation and generations to come. I have this pot here as a visual illustration. A tree planted in this pot will be cared for, receive all it's needed to grow, to get started. And if I'm the planter, I'm going to make sure that it gets all the fertilization, all of the water, the right amount of rain, right amount of sunlight, and it's going to be in this own safe spot. But if I want this tree that I've planted here in this pot to really grow, to experience its full potential capacity, I have to remove it from its safety net. I have to remove what is protected and beautiful, which will eventually become its own limiting factor in growth. At some point, the tree must be uprooted. It must be replanted and released to grow deep into the soil on its own, to have the ability to do more. And if I want to have a ministry that is going to last beyond myself, I must lead in such a way that the next generation will see that I've taken my seedlings, my small plants, taken them out of the nursery, out of the greenhouse, put them in an environment that can be dangerous, and plant them for the purpose of long-term and generational growth. We have that opportunity today. So what is the environment you're developing? What's the environment and the culture and the ministry that you're purposefully developing in your life? Is the culture at your church and your organization one of sustaining power, or is it one of wait till the next event and the next ministry and the next appointment? I would challenge you today, if you have the power to do so, you have the power in your lifetime and to begin today to influence your future and the future generations that follow. I encourage you to do this. I'm going to end with this last statement. I challenge you and encourage you to evaluate and to examine and then to execute and to take action into building a legacy ministry that will last for 100 years into October 29, 21, 25, and see what God can do for the next generation. Blessings.